Kלים Perik Yudalad, Mishnah Aleph. This is the last Perik dealing with Kli. We've had 4 Prokim, Yud Aleph, Yud Beis, Yud Gimel, and now Yudalad. So the Mishnah, Kli is Kamohu Shi'uron. Now we're going to be dealing with Kli which break. At what stage do they become Torah, and at what stage, and at which point do we say they're still Tomei? The basic rule here is for Kli is that as long as they are able to do their original job, maybe not in the same, not up to the same standard, on the same amount or the same quantity or quality, but if they can do me'ein melachton harishono, then the Kli is still Tomei. Let's contrast it with Kli Cheres. With Kli Cheres, didn't have that type of concept. With Kli Cheres, it was a simple concept. There was size of holes. We had a hole of a koinis mashke, moitzi kazayis, moitzi zayis. With matches, the rule is simply, does it do the original job, or me'ein melachta rishona? And we start off with a few Kli matches. And there's a list of, as we can see coming up, Deli, Kumkum, Mecham, Lefes, and Ketonis. The Mefarshim say that some of these are talking about where the Kli has actually got a hole in it, and things are leaking out and it cannot do what it's supposed to do. The other ones are dealing with, this is all from the Tosefta, where the Kli hasn't got a hole in it, but the Kli is just shaky and weakened and battered so that it doesn't do the job, it's not strong enough. So the Tosefta actually makes lists which one is talking about which story. Hadli Kedei Lemalisbo. We are now talking about a case where the Deli hasn't got a hole in it, but the Deli is just weak. It's made for filling, using it for filling up water, and it's now weak and it's shaky. So you can't fill it all up. You fill it all up, it'll break. Says the Mishnah Kedei Lemalisbo. As long as you can still fill up something with it, then it's not called broken. A kettle used for heating up water. Again, if it's so weakened and shaky that it cannot heat up the same amount of water that it used to do, but it can still heat up some water, then it's still called oisimei melachta rishona, and the kli is makabel tuma. If, for instance, the deli has a hole in it, or the kumkum has a hole in it, then the Tosefta actually gives different shiurim. And the next 3 are cases where the things have holes in it. And the Mishnah Achrona actually proves it from the particular words and syntax of the Mishnah, that the first 2 are dealing with what's called nisroya'u, weakened, and the last 3 are dealing with nishbru, there's a hole where it's broken. Mechem kedei lekabel saloim. Mechem is a big urn. And here we're using a different shear. Normally the mechem is used for heating water. But here we say, even though it can't heat water, if you can still use it as a little piggy bank, used to collect slime coins in it, then it's still makabel tuma. And it's quite obvious that the function of kibbul slime must have been one of the original functions, because if it's a new function, then we're back to the rules we mentioned in the last parak, it needs another yichud. So therefore the slime always was a secondary, another function of the mechem, and therefore you go to chumrah and you say it has to be, as long as, if it can still do function number 2, although it can't do function number 1, it's still makabel tuma. Alefes or halafos kedei lekabel ketonos. Alefes is a cauldron, a big pot used for cooking, but it's also used for washing up. Ketonos are little bowls or ladles, and it's used for washing as a washing up bowl. So if it can still be used up as a washing up bowl, although it cannot be used anymore for cooking, because the washing up was one of the original functions, therefore if it can still do that function, it's called oisimei melachta rishona, and it's makabel tuma. Ketonos, the little bowls themselves, the little ladles, kedei lekabel prutos. They were used as small piggy banks, just to take small coins, the prutos. As long as it can still do that function, then it's still makabel tuma. Mishnah carries on, midos yain b'yain, and midos shemen b'shemen. If we're dealing with special midos, a special measuring jug used for wine, then the shear is, if it's got a hole in it, that the wine leaks out and now cannot be used anymore for midos yain, that's it. it's gone. Because this has a specific function of measuring wine. It can't measure wine anymore. It's useless because it leaks. Therefore, it's tahor. And we're in Kli Cheres, we had a concept called koines mashke. Moitzi mashke wasn't enough to be Matar Kli Cheres, because when a Kli Cheres leaks, you just put something underneath it to catch the drops. Whereas a midis yain of metal, this is a chosh of a kli made for measuring. As soon as that leaks, it's gone. Midah shemen b'shemen, if it's a midah used for measuring oil, then the shear of the whole is, if it leaks oil, then it's tahor. Rabbi Eliezer kulam b'frutos. He is very machmer. He says even though these things, everything leaks and cannot contain water, you cannot heat up things, etc., etc. You can't measure yain or shemen. This is Rabbi Eliezer. We mentioned him before in Perik. If you can go back to Perik Gimel Mishnah base, where Rabbi Eliezer has a shitta there that you even go what's called bosa miyut tashmish l'chumra, even though the secondary function is called a miyut tashmish, and according to most Tanoim is not important enough to determine the tashmish of the kli. Rabbi Eliezer says if that's a miyut tashmish, if it's a very sparsely used tashmish, then as long as it can still do that tashmish, the kli is still tomei. That's a shittei chidah of Rabbi Eliezer. And therefore, if it can still contain coins, because some people occasionally put coins in it, then you go according to the coins, and therefore it's still tomei. Now, the last bit of the Mishnah, according to most Rishonim, the way they explain this bit of the Mishnah has absolutely nothing to do with the first bit of the Mishnah. According to the Perish of the Gra, it fits in very beautifully. But this is a problem. We will do the Perish of the Bartanur in the row of Rishonim because of who they are. But it's difficult to understand, to get the link between this and the Perish of the Mishnah. What does the Mishnah say? Rabbi Kiva Omer. We're talking about Kli Matchas. This time we're not talking about Kli Matchas which are broken. We're talking about Kli Matchas in the stage of their manufacture. And we're saying at which stage do they become completely, they become nigmar, so now they are mekabel tumah. Says Rabbi Kiva, mechusa chatifa tomei. Bartanur is actually goyres. Instead of the word chatifa, it's goyres hagofa. Hagofa means putting a lid on. If the keli is finished, you just haven't put the lid on. That's finished. It's tomei. Because the lid is something extra. The keli can still do its function, and therefore the kli is called a gemar, and therefore the kli is tomei. However, mechusa letisha tar. If it's still in a crude state, it needs polishing to make it shiny, to make it smooth. And when it comes to matchos, that's not called finished, because matchos, when it's rough and unpolished, cannot be used. Therefore, matchos, which is mechusa l'tisha, needs polishing, is tahor. We have to contrast this with the Mishnah at the end of Perikut base, where it talks about golme kli eitz. Kli eitz in themselves, being wood, being a cruder material than metal. There, as soon as it is in the form of a golem, even without the polishing, is mekabel tumah, because that's considered finished with eitz. But with matchos, it's not until it is polished, and we've polished off this Mishnah.